One.
Basically, this generation is more liberal, more tolerant, more Democrat-leaning than the one before. It's not just because they're young.
For another point of view, it's Hard News with Russell Brown and Wamm on Kiwi.
This is Head Honcho at publicaddress.net with the Hard News blog, also at Media 7, TVNZ7. Morning to you, Russell.
Good morning.
First up today, John Key at the Big Gay Out on the weekend.
Yes. Yeah, the Big Gay Out, I must say, was quite a remarkable thing to come back to from up north in Warkworth, where we both were. You couldn't get near the thing.
Really, was it that? I mean, it was a hot day, though, wasn't it?
It was a very hot day,
yeah.
And it was down at Coyle Park in Point Chev, as it usually is.
Yeah.
And it was parked up about 3 kilometres away, basically.
Wow.
But yeah, it's always a very relaxed sort of affair. I kind of like in a way, the great normalcy of it. But anyway, of course, the politicians turn up looking for votes. Labour always brings a small army.
Yeah.
It would be fair to say that Phil Goff didn't have too much to say on the stage, other than acknowledging that we've come a long way, but there's still need for further reform.
Yeah.
Because there's still discrimination out there in the community. Nothing like a policy statement, let alone marriage equality, which I think is what people are starting to talk about now. And of course, John Key turned up as well with a couple of his MPs, including Nikki Kay. And the best he could offer was, we won't take away any of the rights that Labour have given you. And then allowed himself to be interviewed by Stephen Oates, who has been on many radio and TV programs, and now has a show on Radio Ponsonby.
Yeah.
And Stephen Oates asked him a really interesting question. He said, were the vote for civil unions on in Parliament today, given that you voted against it at the time, how would you vote now? And John Key, it was a little bit like what was your attitude to the Springbok tour?
Yeah.
He said, rather remarkably, you'll have to wait for my book to know that.
Pretty odd response.
Yeah, I know the answer, but I'm not going to tell you now. You'll have to wait for my book. And look, I've got no objection to Key writing a book or having one written about him. I mean, Helen Clark had Brian Edwards' rather fawning biography quite early in her term. Muldoon used to fire out, autobiographical tracts all the time. But the idea that you can, as Prime Minister of New Zealand, refuse to answer a pretty direct material question of principle from a member of the interest group you've come to solicit votes from, by saying you'll have to wait for my book, I just found that utterly insulting.
Do you think it was a prepared answer, or do you think he was just so taken aback by the question?
Yeah,
and wasn't expecting it, that he didn't really know what to say? I
don't know. Probably the latter. He probably was taken aback, and to be fair, his natural instinct is to avoid taking a stand.
Yeah.
In case it might offend someone. But I thought that was extraordinary in that circumstance. It's a very straightforward question of principle. It was almost
like he'd said, he could have said, I haven't had advice on how to answer this question.
Yeah, exactly. We're always open to ideas. So there are any number of ways he could have flubbed it, dodged the question, I guess, as politicians do.
Yeah.
But to say, there is an answer, but I'm not going to tell you. You'll have to wait for my book. Wow. And certainly, I had a look at what Stephen had to say on Facebook later on. He was extremely unimpressed.
Would you? Because no one's actually talking about what he might actually think, or what John Key actually would say in his book. Would you put money on he would vote for civil unions or against?
I have no idea.
Isn't that crazy? We don't know from the man himself, the leader of the country. We have no idea of his thoughts on this matter.
Exactly. I could not guess at it. But
crazy.
This is when you come down to questions of principle with John Key, it really does gets murky.
But
it's really hard to know what he believes in.
But we do know who he thinks really hot.
Oh, yes. spare me that. Yeah, no, I think they may actually be... Well, I mean, it's actually interesting what he's been doing, going on a certain radio show and saying these things.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's conscious or not, I suspect there is some conscious direction in there. They've, looked at the polling, looked at who he needs to appeal to, and gone for that. But, yeah, it's certainly unedifying. It really is. The one thing, of course, that he could get behind was Nikki Kay's idea for a revived hero parade, which is fine in itself, but really,
Well, yeah, it's got to be financially viable and sustainable.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know where that's coming from, but anyway.
Yeah, and I have to say, I mean, the Auckland Council, the Auckland City Council back in the day refused several years in a row to support the Hero Parade, and all the support that was actually asked of them was actually just cleaning up afterwards, just putting on some extra rubbish detail.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't even do that. But, we tend to forget that the first New Zealand Prime Minister to hold out the promise of civil unions was actually Jenny Shipley at the Hero Parade 1999.
Yeah.
She never got the chance to do it. But, yes.
Okay, well, from the unconference on the weekend, that was Kiwi Fu, to something else that you're going to this weekend, which is Webstock, which is far more planned, I suppose.
Yeah, it is, and it's got the hell lineup, I have to say. Webstock's a remarkable thing. It's a international quality web conference in Wellington, and I think because of the style that it's mounted in and the obvious goodwill of the people who put it together, they actually get a really good lineup. Marco Amont, who is the founder of Instapaper, Doug Bowman, creative director at Twitter, a guy called Tom Coates, who's was one of the first bloggers, amazing ex-BBC via Yahoo guy, really interesting guy. Hopefully we're having all of those on our Media 7 special, which will screen next week.
Oh, great.
And also Peter Sunder, the co-founder of the Pirate Bay, and Amanda Palmer. So I'm quite excited.
Where do you think the Pirate Bay chap's going to be coming from? What's his...
Oh, I mean, they actually have a reasonable depth of philosophy at the Pirate Bay. They're not just vandals, and one interesting thing they've done is started up this micropayment system called Flatterer, which is like flatter without an E.
Yeah.
And the idea of that is that you put in a certain amount every month, and their system works out what you've looked at or downloaded, and divvies it up like that, and sends it through to the copyright owner.
Does that really? To the movie company or whatever?
Yeah.
Wow. That's cool.
I think it might be a year or three before copyright owners actually think that's a viable idea. But I'm quite impressed that they're thinking in that way.
Yeah,
so,
makes a huge amount of sense.
Yeah, no, I'm quite. The idea is to have him and Amanda Palmer interviewed together. So you'll have the creator of creative works and the man who would make them all free.
Good, because I hope at the end of the day they agree that consumers actually do want to pay if it's made simple and easy and with no fuss. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And my ridiculously busy week and a half ends on Saturday when I'm fronting the Onyas, which are the Associated New Zealand Web Awards at the Wellington Town Hall. So after that, I'll be having a wee lie down.
Yeah, look forward to hearing about the winners next week.
Indeed.
Thanks, Russell.
Okay.
Cheers. See ya. Russell Brown at publicaddress.net, the Hard News blog, Media 7